Hey everybody, it's me, Sign Mountain, aka David Soto. Welcome to the Colorado Modular Synths Society September show. I can't believe it, it's September already. Yeah, this is our September show. We're going to be talking about DIY modular and a whole bunch of stuff. I have a bunch of great guests I'm going to introduce here in a second. Sitting next to me is my friend Bryce from Band Reject. You might have saw that show last month. Back here at Building 61 where we're broadcasting live streaming. We have some friends also joining. Oops, we have some friends. We have some friends joining us also in the background there. They're doing some soldering. Yeah, but it's because you can't have a DIY show without real life soldering. So here we are. You know what I mean? So thank you. We're going to talk about a lot of different things here. Bryce is going to talk about some DIY stuff. He's going to give us some good background on tips and stuff like that on building. And then I have an amazing panel put together today. We also have some other our friends in SoCal Synth Society. Also doing some live soldering with us. So if you're at home soldering, big ups right on. I'm excited. And if you're thinking about getting into it, this is a great show to be watching right now. Then we're also going to have a performance by Jay McCoy, who's also here over at Starling. Starling is also joining us as well. So let me go ahead and start introducing people before I forget. So let me go around. So like I mentioned, Bryce is here from Band Reject. Right on. I also have Quinca's, aka Synth DIY guy. Let me go ahead and turn your mic. So you turn your unmic yourself. Sorry. Yeah. Oh. Welcome,
Hey,
Kikas.
folks. Hey,
Right.
directly
Joining
from
us
Acapulco.
from Acapulco. Thank you for dropping in. So excited to have you here. I have the
Thank you
Starling
for
crew with
having
me. I
us.
have Jay and Will and Jay McCoy over here. From are you at Starling headquarters? Is that what I should call it? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. It's got the Starling crew, and then I got SoCal Synth Society, and Travarsi's over there. Travarsi, who else is with you over there?
We have Abe Mora, aka Earth626, and Justin, aka
Synthetic.
Synthetic. Sorry, I always do that. All right, there you go.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. It's so awesome to have you here. Again, big shout out to Building 61 for hosting and letting us broadcast from their building and using their facilities. It's been so awesome. There he is. There's Adam. There's our homie. Yep. Also, Patchworks. Big shout out to Patchworks, who's helping support the show as well. They sent us over some kits from Waveform magazine. So some of the guys back there are building some different kits, some of their own, but also some of the Catwalk Waveform kits. I'll drop a link in chat here in a second to show everybody what that looks like. Yeah, and so let's get started. Start talking about this stuff. So I want to just quickly let Bryce go into his talk real quick, and then we'll bring everybody else in. So, but if you all have questions while Bryce is talking, go ahead and feel free to jump in. And Bryce is going to give some tips and background on building kits. Because Bryce, first, before we get started, before we start talking about what you do, tell everybody a little bit about your background in synths and stuff.
Sure. So my name is Bryce Wemple. I live up in Fort Collins. And I've been into synthesizers since I was, 14, 15. And also have had an interest in electronics for a long time. So being able to combine electronics and music and build my own synthesizers has been awesome and fun. And over the last 3 years, I've really gotten into eurorack and have built a number, probably close to 100 modules now, and helped other people build modules. And I've learned a lot along the way. And so today what I'm going to do is go over some of the things I've learned around the tools, supplies, and then some techniques that I've learned. I'm really going to focus mostly on surface mount soldering. We can talk about through-hole, of course. I'm set up to do some demo of through-hole too, if that's what folks would like to see. But mostly what I'm going to talk about is surface mount, since a lot of the available boards out in the marketplace are surface mount for the most part. So I'm going to focus on that. So that's where I'll get started.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Bryce. Bryce, just so everybody knows, when we first started doing these meetups, so many years ago. Bryce came down and did our very first DIY talk, so it's great. I'm so happy to have you back. That was a great talk, and then still taught me a lot because I don't know a ton about soldering and stuff. Even though I've been around it a little more than usual in the last few years, but so excited. So let me know. I can switch the cameras, and so you can.
All right. So let's get started. So we'll switch over to the top view. Thanks. So what I'm going to do is kind of run through some of the tools and the supplies that I found have been really, really helpful in building over the years. So I'm probably just going to go maybe counterclockwise here. So over in the corner, I've got my couple of handy tools, which all should look familiar to everyone: a pair of diagonal cutters, a pair of needle nose pliers, and wire strippers. These are sort of the old school tools, most usually used for doing through-hole soldering. Occasionally, you might need one of these for trimming tabs or something on a pod or something else that you're building, but good to have the basic tools. Then I have a soldering iron. I'm using a McCoy. This is an older sort of industrial soldering iron, but very solid and reliable. Like it a lot. What's really important for surface mount soldering specifically is the soldering tip. So this particular soldering iron has what's called a hoof tip, and it's pretty small. And the hoof tip is really great because it's got some surface that kind of holds solder for you. And in some cases, you actually put solder on the tip first and then apply that to the circuit board. So you want to have the right kind of tip. And the hoof tip I found to be the most useful. In front of my soldering iron, of course, is my trusty sponge. I don't use a sponge that much. The downside of the sponge is it cools off the tip really fast, and then it has to heat back up again. So usually I use this guy, which probably looks familiar. I think this is like brass material, and you just poke the iron in and that cleans it. So that's a really good way to clean it, and it doesn't cool off the iron, so your iron stays hot. So that's it for the soldering gear. And then for solder, I'm using this handy little soldering dispenser I found online. You just load your solder roll into it and pull the solder through. I'm using really fine solder. This is 6337, which is the split between lead and tin. Most solder is 6040. I found this solder after trial and error to work really well. So I've kind of stuck with it over the years. And it's real fine. It's 0.38 millimeter. So it's pretty small stuff, but it works really well. The other solder I have in here is solder I use for like pots, sometimes jacks. This is heavier gauge solder. It also has silver in it, and it's real strong. It's a more durable solder, so I use that too. So those are the main two solders I use. Both have flux built into them, so you don't have to have flux specifically for those. And then on the topic of flux, I use two different fluxes primarily. So a flux pen is super handy. Probably heard other people talk about these. I use this Kester flux pen. If I can get it in focus here, there we go. So these are very inexpensive. I don't know, $10 or $12. The flux type is $186, but these are great, and I'll explain why when we get to actually doing some soldering, why these are so handy. The other flux I use is basically the same product, but it's just in a liquid form, and I just buy it in a bottle on eBay, actually, is where this came from. So that's it for flux, and flux is super important when you're doing surface mount soldering, and we'll get into that more in a few minutes. The other thing I found really handy is this little guy, which is actually for makeup. This is for using a cotton ball to take your makeup off. This is great for dispensing alcohol, which I use a lot. I use isopropyl alcohol. I think this is 91%, but higher percentage, the better. But this little dispenser, which I'll demonstrate it in a little bit, is super handy. It's just got a little pump mechanism, and it distributes the alcohol out, so it's really simple to use. I don't remember where I saw this, but somebody had a tip on that, and it's very handy. The other really common thing I use is Q-tips. Nothing special, just plain old Q-tips. Then we get into some of the other tools I use. So of course, for surface mount, you got to have a good pair of tweezers. And actually, I find the sharper the better. They don't need to be super fancy, expensive, but just a really good, sharp set of tweezers are really critical for soldering small parts. So these are an important thing to have. And then a couple of other things I wanted to talk about was tools I use if I make a mistake. So no one's perfect, and sometimes you solder chip on backwards. or the wrong chip. So it's nice to have some way to recover from that. So I use this stuff called Fast Chip. This is a low melt solder product, which is super handy for moving parts without damaging them or damaging the circuit board. So I'll do a demo of this. This stuff is gold. It's fantastic. It's not super expensive. Very, very useful. And then the other thing I use is solder wick. This is Chemwick brand solder, solder wick. Found this to work really well. It's number 4. And so what this does is it sucks away the solder. So if you make a mistake, say on installing the wrong pot value, you can remove the pot and remove the solder just by using this wick and heating it with a soldering iron. It sucks away the solder. So those are 2 really important tools for recovering from a mistake and not damaging pads or damaging a component. So I use those 2 things a lot. Then let's see, what else do I have here? I have some other just random tools, some screwdrivers. So these should look familiar to most folks. So nut drivers for pots or nuts on jacks. And then this is a standard driver for the really Thonkin jacks, or the I forget what they're called, but the nuts with the little slots in them. So this is a very special tool. I think this is made, don't remember who makes this actually, but you can find these online. This is real handy for putting on nuts. So those are great too. I also brought just some random screwdrivers that you might need occasionally if you're putting together a module that has screws. I find these to be the best screwdrivers on the planet. They're made in Germany. They've got a little piece on the end so you can use them, and they're just really comfortable, fit in your hand. Let's see, the other thing I use is chem wipes. So cleanup is a big deal to get extra flux off the circuit board. Chem wipes work great. I'll do a demo of how I use these, but they're great because they don't leave behind particles or debris on the board, so they clean up really well. So these are really invaluable. So I think that's it. Oh, one more thing is a toothbrush.
Yeah, I was asking about that.
Got to have an old toothbrush. These are what I use for cleanup. So to loosen flux after soldering to clean up, I use a toothbrush. And I'll give a demo of how I use this too. So I use this in conjunction with the chem wipes and the alcohol, and specifically this dispenser. So
a lot of people might not know this, but those are also really great for getting rid of cavities, preventing cavities. So that's a hot tip here.
Yeah. So that's really my assortment of tools that I use for primarily for surface mount. Again, some of these overlap through hole soldering as well. I could take questions at this point if anyone online has questions.
Let me ask you a question to the crew here.
We'll continue on here.
Just want to see if I can get it on this. Quinca, you build you build a lot. So is your setup something similar like this when you're building?
Well, I don't build that much SMD. Most of the kits I get are either through hole or the SMD pre-soldered, and then you get to only assemble the hardware components. But I am getting started with SMD a little more seriously, and I'm making the noob mistakes and the blunders as expected as anybody else would. For example, I took it upon myself to replace some diodes on a prototype board by a very reputable manufacturer who probably wouldn't want me to expose him here right now. And I didn't use any kind of shield. And I had just gotten my first air gun, and I was like, oh, I'll use the air gun instead of the iron. And I unglued a whole bunch of parts around the one that I wanted to remove, and then made a mess trying to put them back in, So that's how I found out about using a heat shield for that kind of a thing. Obviously, it would have been easier. What I got now, I have tweezers like the ones that you have. I use thin solder as well. I have a Banggood just sent me over a microscope. So I'm trying to get used to the microscope, because when you use a magnifier, you're still looking at the actual thing that you're soldering. But when you're using a digital microscope, you're now looking at a screen. So the eye to hand coordination takes a little getting used to. But man, does it really make a difference. You can actually see even the markings on the part and what the component is and all that. So I'm just starting really to get into a little more SMD. But it's yeah, pretty much. I need some more things. I don't have as complete a kit. For example, I still use pliers with a heat shrink on top to tighten nuts and stuff because my nut drivers don't always fit and things like that. I'm still kind of improvised in the way that I do things, not as professional. But yeah, I'd like to. Well, one thing that I did get is a nice silicone heat-resistant mat with all
Oh,
sorts of little compartments in it, and that's great because then the parts don't fly around. You know, I can choose a compartment for just the resistors that I'm about to place, and I found that was a helpful addition to the whole thing. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
that's awesome. Well, cool. Uh, well, if you need more help, we got Bryce here to help you out. You know.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna learn a lot. I'm watching very intently right now.
Okay. Awesome, cool. Well, let's get back to it for a little bit. We'll come back for some more questions, and if you guys have anything to add, just go ahead and pipe on in. All right, there you go.
All right, thanks. So one thing I want to also point out is I typically hand solder all surface mount. I don't use hot air. I know there's a lot of people that do build in those techniques for using solder paste and pre-placing components and then heating them using various techniques. That's not a method I've ever explored. I've been pretty successful just hand soldering everything, and I've been able to, teach myself a way to do that. Maybe it's a little more time consuming, but at least it's been successful. My modules usually work when I turn them on.
I think I'm totally in your camp on that, except for removing. When you've done something wrong, then to remove a chip with an iron, it's just easier to pull it out with the air, I think.
Yeah, and I'll show how to use this quick chip because that really solves that problem. I'll remove an op amp with the quick chip, and you'll see how easy it is to pull off without using hot air.
All right, cool.
It's pretty slick. So, a couple other things I forgot to cover. This little tray has been the best. This is just literally a plastic cover for some electrical tape that I bought. But the fact that it's clear and small has been really handy, and I'll show you why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demo of soldering on just a bypass cap. This is a 100N capacitor. This is an 0603 size component. So a lot of the SMD boards that are out there, so I'll just show you these actually real quick, are 0603, and that defines the size of the passive components, so the resistors and the capacitors. Some boards, very few in the DIY world, are 0402. Those are pretty tough to solder without a microscope, so 0603 is typically what I focus on. Some boards use larger parts, 0805 or 1206. But typically, like the mutable instruments boards, those have all been relayed out for 0603, which is what I have here. So this is a Clouds original laid out for 0603. So this is what I'm going to actually demo, putting a couple of components on. As far as suppliers, I get most boards from Pusherman in the UK, very reliable source, great selection. Pretty fast to the US. Coming from the UK, usually get them in 10 to 14 days. So I buy most of my parts from there and have had really good success working with them.
Quick question on you're saying that most of the boards are a certain configuration. Is there a way to, if you're going to build something, is it easy to know if that board is going to be, you're going to need a microscope or not?
Yeah, so when you get the bill of materials, and I usually print them out, and I didn't for today, but I have them on my phone, so you can just download a PDF of the bill of materials, and that'll define all the parts and tell you what size they are. And there's different size indicators for silicon parts like diodes or transistors, but again, the resistors and capacitors will most likely be 0603, and it'll tell you that in the bill of materials. So
read that.
Yeah, read the bill of material. But again, most stuff is going to be that. It's rare to find 0403. Pusherman has a few boards that are 0402, but not very many.
Okay. Cool.
And those parts are really small. So I'm going to show doing an 0603 placement using a technique called reflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is parts come on these little tape rolls like this, which hopefully look familiar. I buy most of my parts from Mauser online. And I'm just going to peel off a couple of pieces here. My vision's not so great, so I have to look in close.
That helps.
And then So now I've got them in my tray, and the great thing about this is, so if you've got components that go on a certain way, that are, have a side up, so to speak, you can use this and flip it around, and you can kind of I can't say the word. You can get the part to flip into the right orientation. So that's what's nice about having this tray. You can just pick up and slide around. Plus, because it's relatively clear, you can easily see the parts. I have an op amp sitting in here as well, so we're going to put that on. So having a way to clearly see your part, and then being able to manipulate if you need to flip the part over if it's upside down. So here's where my tweezers come into play. And so if you want to go ahead and flip on the close-up view here, we're going to use a USB microscope and zoom in, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. And again, what I'm going to do is just place a couple of bypass capacitors. Let's see if we can line this up. So I'm just going to put my tweezers here. And okay, there we go. So again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how you figure out what parts to put on. That's sort of a whole discussion in itself. But I looked in the bill of material, and I happen to know that these two parts here are bypass capacitors, or 100N is the value. So these are the ones I'm going to solder. So I use my trusty flux pen. And the flux pen, actually, the tip is a little bit abrasive, which is really great because that helps to scrape off any oxidation that's on the pad. And then it applies flux at the same time, and it's not messy, and it doesn't run all over. So it's a really great way to control how much flux you apply. And then also, by sort of scraping gently the pad, you're actually cleaning it and removing any residue or oxidation. The other step that I usually do is I clean the whole circuit board with isopropyl alcohol first. So typically, if I was starting with a new clean board that came in the mail, I would just clean the whole thing with a chem wipe and alcohol to clean off any residue, any oxidation that's built up since the board was manufactured. So that's actually the very first step. Now what I'm going to do, the other piece of equipment I didn't share is this guy.
Let me switch over to that camera.
Which are indispensable because I don't have great vision anymore. And so this really helps me be able to do soldering basically without a microscope. So these are 3.5x magnification. These are something you can buy on eBay. They're real common. And so I'm going to use these so I can see what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think you look cool in them too. So.
Do I look cool in them too?
Yeah,
okay. And then the other thing I use, which I'm not going to use today, but I brought it just as an example. So fume from soldering is a thing. Fumes you don't want to breathe. They're not good for you. So I have this welding mask, or it's designed for welders to go under a welding mask, but it's a respirator. And I use this when I solder at home. I'm not going to wear it today just because it's bulky, but this is what I usually use to keep myself from inhaling bad things. All right, so let's switch over to this guy.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and just clean my tip in the sponge real quick. And then what I'm going to do is get my solder. So the first step is now I'm right-handed. And so the first step is to apply solder to one of the pads. And since I'm right-handed, I apply it to the right pad. That's sort of my habit. If you want to go ahead and give me some light again, and
yeah,
we can see what we're doing. Okay.
Cool. Let's see.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply solder to the right hand side, just a little bit, so it's just a little ball, and that's it. So hopefully you can see that I just added a little ball of solder on each side.
Maybe like
you need a focus.
A little bit of focus.
Yeah, it's that gray. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
Okay.
Someone was asking, what are your thoughts on order of putting down parts in SMD? ICs first?
I always do ICs first, actually. So the order of what and I'm not doing that obviously today, but the order in which I typically build is all the silicon. So any IC, so that's MCU, op amp, diodes, transistors. So any of those parts I put on first. Then I do passive components, so resistors, capacitors, the smaller capacitors, and then I do the larger surface mount capacitors last. And then after that, obviously, jacks and pots. So that's the order I've always done it in. I usually don't build up the MCU with the supporting power parts to flash it first. I know a lot of people do that. I've never had an issue with a completely built board and flashing it. It's always worked. So I've never run into a problem there. So I just build the whole thing and then flash it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and apply a part. So I need to grab my little component here.
This is the part this is the part I always like have a hard time with, like finding the part.
Okay, so having this clear tray is awesome because you can really clearly see the part.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slide the part right into position. So I'm going to heat the part. That's why it's called reheat. I'm going to reheat the solder in the left pad, and then I'm just going to slide it in like that. So now what I've done is basically soldered half of that component. All right, and then so to solder the other half, I'm not going to move it just because I don't want to have to set it up here.
Yeah.
So now what I'm going to do to solder the other half, and I'm actually going to use my solder. I don't want to hit this thing here. It's a little tricky. And I'm just going to heat the corner here. I can get in here and see what I'm doing. Oops. I'm going to heat the pad and the edge of the component. A little bit too much solder there, but you get the idea. So then you just heat the other side, apply solder, and now that component is fully soldered. Okay. Now I'll do the other one just so we can see it again here. And I pulled out two parts, so I'll do the other one. So I'll find my part. Again, sharp tweezers are great for this. And then find my little dot of solder, heat it, slide the part in, and let go. It's that quick. And then I can take my solder, and so I can rotate this and not lose view. I think that'll work. And then I'm just going to heat the pad and the component. Oh, sure why it's not flowing there. Oh. There we go. That's it. So now I've soldered both sides there. So that's soldering a passive component, resistor or capacitor. Now, cleanup. So here's where the toothbrush comes in. So I'm going to use my alcohol dispenser here. And this thing is so cool because you just pump it like this. Just push on it with your toothbrush, and it dispenses alcohol. And so there's two methods I use. Yeah, if you want to go back for me. Because you can see now I've got flux all over the board. Now, I would do this after I've already applied all the parts. But let's just assume that I have. So now what I'm going to do is just brush it with a toothbrush. And that's going to dissolve the extra flux. And then what I'll do is use a chem wipe. And you can put the chem wipe over it like that. And that kind of sucks all the flux and contaminant off the board. Now when I remove that and it dries, you can see it's still wet. When all that dries, I should have a really clean solder connection.
Yeah. I mean, I buy it. Looks good.
Yeah, it's still a little wet. So once that all dries, it should be pretty good. And then I usually do a final clean once everything is done with alcohol. So that's basically how to hand solder an 0603 part. So the other demonstration I wanted to do was soldering an op amp, so an actual silicon part. And so what I'm going to use is, this is a pre-soldered board that Pusherman sells. They now sell quite a few products that are preloaded with most of the components, so you don't have to solder everything yourself. So you can see this one's already got some of the components pre-soldered on it, which is kind of nice. It still has some you have to do, but not very many. This particular one, this is a Ripples version 2. And what I'm going to do is solder on the VCA chip, the 2164 chip, which goes right where I'm showing you. So again, we're going to use my flux pen. I'm going to flux up, and again, this also cleans the oxidation off the pads. So I'll just run it around here, and you can see they'll shine more too when you clean them. You actually can see them get shiny. One of the other techniques I use for like an MCU, for example, which is the larger square chips, I'll put flux on and then apply the chip and let it sit overnight, and the flux acts like glue. When it dries, it gets real sticky and hard like glue, and that holds the chip in place. So the next day when I go to solder it, I don't have to worry about the chip sliding out of position.
Okay.
It holds it in place. So
Marinate.
yeah. So this particular chip, I want to make sure I have the orientation right. And I don't. It's upside down. Flip this guy around. So most boards have indicators on the silk screening to indicate which position a chip goes in. So for example, this chip next to it, see there's a little circle there that indicate. This particular one doesn't, but I just happen to know from previous experience the way this chip goes on. So I'm just gonna.
How many of these have you built?
Slide in here. How many of this module?
Yeah.
I've never built one of these.
Okay.
Not a version 2. I built several version 1 ripples, but not a version 2.
Well, how many? What's the most module you've made?
I built 5 plates. No, I built more than that. I built 7 plates.
Nice.
5 of the micro version and then 2 of the full size ones.
All right.
So typically what I will do, so you can see I've got the chips set up, but it's not very aligned. I have an old school microscope I use at home to typically align up the chip, but I'll be able to get it pretty close. I'm just gonna zoom in here. Just give me a second.
You got it?
And slide this guy into place. So you want to get it square on the pads in all directions. And then I usually just kind of push it down a little bit. And the flux helps to hold it. So I think that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Looks pretty aligned to me.
Yeah.
So now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to use reflow this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the solder to the iron first, which sounds sort of backwards, but to get me started here, I'm going to put a little bit of solder on my iron, and then I'm just going to apply it to the corner, and I'm going to pin one of the legs down like that. It's very hard to see, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, and then
on the edge.
Yeah, once I get one leg soldered, then I usually just use the solder and the iron, and I can just come in here and just get it to flow and do all the rest. So I'm just heating the pad and the leg of the chip and just soldering through. Are you able to see that, David?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So that's it. So I just soldered half that chip. I can show you there. Not sure how well that's coming through, but
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, so I just apply all the solder. So I'll just, in the interest of time here, I won't do the other side. But so again, I'll use the same technique now to clean it. Apply some alcohol. Get my little thing to cooperate here. We'll just come in here. And you can scrub it pretty well. It's not going to hurt anything. And I use my chem wipe, and that sort of wicks away all of the flux. And then once that dries, I'll have a nice solder joint. It's a little hard to tell from this shot, and I may have a little bit too much solder. It's a little hard for me to see. Actually, it looks pretty good with the naked eye.
I mean, I've started a few times before, and I couldn't even see what was underneath it, and I got
Yeah.
done with it.
So let's say I've finished this, and I realize that I put the chip on backwards. So now we're going to get to the kind of the recovery part. So what do you do when you make a mistake? So I've just built a whole module, and I realized I put on a chip backwards. Oops, that's bad. So now I go into recovery mode. So Quinca was pointing out earlier, it's tricky to get parts off that have lots of legs. So that's where this fast chip product comes into play. Again, this is a low melt solder, so the basic idea is that you apply it just like normal solder, but it doesn't harden very fast. Well, it takes several seconds, so you have a little bit of time to remove the part before the solder fully cools. So what I'm going to do, so the trick to using this stuff is you need a lot of flux. So here's what I'm going to bring in my other flux that I use. And so, yeah, so this is just a liquid Kestrel flux product that I bought online, readily available. And so I'm going to flood this whole part with flux, because this is where flux really helps to make sure that you get a good adhesion of this low melt solder because it kind of likes to go all over the place. It doesn't really melt very evenly. So what I do then is bring it in, and I'm just gonna heat it and just create a line of it all across all the legs, just enough to fill in all the legs. So there you go. So you can see how I filled in that whole side. And so now if I've done it properly, I should literally be able to pick that chip up. Oh, it's cooled too fast. Hold on one second here. Kind of have to do this a little faster. So there we go. You can see the chip moving in there. I just lift the chip right off. So very, very easy. That chip is not damaged. You can use now wick to remove any of the extra solder off the chip. So I'll show how to do that. So now I'll use my Chemwick solder. Let me get some fresh on the end here. And so now I'm able to go in and remove the excess quick chip solder now because I made a little bit of a mess. If I move it, you can see I got a big blob of it now, which isn't a big deal. Just come in here. And now my solder wick just sucks it all up. And I get it all out of the way. Okay. And then I can clean that. And I should be able to get back to right where I was. I got most of that off. I'm having a little bit of a hard time saying. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's little...
Yeah, it's not optimal here. But yeah, just one sec, Matt. Do that, and then I'll use my Chemwick again. Come in here and clean it. And now I'm back to basically where I was. I have clean pads. Almost clean pads. I can do a little bit better than that,
Yeah.
But I can't really see.
That's
Apologize.
okay.
But you get the idea.
Not
So
bad
now
for a live show.
Yeah, so now I've basically recovered. So I've not destroyed the pads. I've cleaned it back up. And now I can take my component and resolder on the correct orientation and not have to go buy another chip or another board or start over. So the quick chip stuff is magic. The other place where I've used it is, for example, if you solder in the wrong pot value, it's really easy. If you use a quick chip on all three of the pins, it'll just release the pot. It comes right out. So it makes it really easy for removing large components as well. So it's really, really handy stuff. So that is, I think, most of what I wanted to go over.
Yeah,
and
that's
we'll
awesome.
take some questions.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Bring in the...
I got a quick question.
We got a question from the back.
Yo. So what about, you ever use these
Here, come up here so they can get the mic.
Okay.
Rayanism is in the
Bryce,
house.
what do you think about solder suckers?
So that's a really good solder sucker. So this is Matt showing this here. These are from Japan. This is sort of the Ferrari of solder suckers.
Ferraris?
Yeah, this is like if Gucci made solder suckers, this is what the product would be.
Yeah.
They're super awesome. And actually, there's several reasons why. So they have a silicon tip, so you can get really good connection with whatever you're removing the solder. So there's definitely a place for using these when recovering from a mistake or needing to remove a component. So I do have one of these exactly like this, and I do use it. But most of the time, if I'm removing something that has lots of pins, I find that the quick chip product works better because I can get all of the joint heated with that molten solder, and it stays molten, and then the part just pulls out. So I don't have to worry about it ripping pads or anything like that. So definitely a place for using one of these, but I use it less, actually. I mostly use wick and that low melt solder. I've found that to be pretty much, it meets the needs every time I need to fix something when I make a mistake.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks, Bryce.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good choice.
Good choice.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Still only $20.
Those are good.
Ferrari / Gucci.
Yeah, so the other brand is Solder Pullet. Those are okay, but those are really good.
No, that's cool. Yeah, those are more like the 4 decibel.
What about
Yeah.
unleaded
Yeah.
solder?
What's that?
What about unleaded solder? What's your opinion on that? That seems to be a heated debate.
Yeah, so I don't like using unleaded solder. It doesn't flow nearly as well. And if you're working on a board that, say you're repairing that has leaded solder, it doesn't work very well. You can't really mix leaded and unleaded solder don't really mix together. I just find that leaded solder, you get a much better solder joint in my experience. I know there's a lot of people that use unleaded, but I've always used leaded, and I've had a much better reliability with leaded solder than unleaded. Unleaded solder just typically doesn't flow very well, and you don't get a nice, shiny, solid result. It just looks kind of dull, and it always looks like a cold solder joint. It just doesn't seem to work very well.
It's more made for a machine assembly, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. For hand soldering, leaded is just the way to go, in my opinion.
I've never even tried unleaded. It's not what my local mom and pop store is.
You probably get frustrated with it. You'll go, "What is this junk?" Because it just doesn't flow right. It just acts really weird.
Yeah. But SoCal crew, what are you guys using? Are you guys using unleaded? Leaded? High octane?
Now answer. Go ahead.
It's all lead, Kester,
Lead, yeah.
331, and
Yeah, what is this
Yeah.
stuff?
331.
Okay.
Got that 331.
This stuff is Kester too that I have, and I don't remember what model number this stuff is, but this stuff works great.
Well, what are you guys using over there? Are you guys using that?
I think-
One question. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so like for reflow work, I think we tend to use like leaded solder. I think when we were like making production modules, we used unleaded solder just for like just in case we ran into any issues with like Rojas or something. But yeah, it was such a pain to use, and that was just through hole too. So yeah, if you're doing something just for yourself, don't
the
put
lower
yourself through
melting point. Yeah, the lower melting point of leaded solder helps a lot with rework, and we do tend to just to know like we don't use that chip quick stuff or whatever. We tend to use the hot air to do desoldering, which is nice. But then you need to make sure you don't bump. Like you can sometimes desolder a larger area than you're interested in.
That's what happened to me. Hell.
I want to try that stuff. It seems like it seems like it'd be very hard to rip traces too. And for me, like nothing is more frustrating than ripping a trace. Like that's like the worst thing that you can do.
And
Yeah, I've never ripped a trace with it. Yep.
I was gonna ask actually, like, because you got all the techniques. Like I'm taking notes over here. Do you use the same soldering technique for finer pitch ICs? So like one of the STM32s or like a TSOP package or something, or do you have a slightly different technique?
I use basically the same technique, but I typically do really small parts under a microscope. But I do the same sort of heat. I apply the flux first. And then I apply the solder to the soldering iron, and then I add the solder to the joint, and so the flux basically, is the catalyst to get the solder to flow into the part and the pad. So I do use that.
And it tacks it a little bit too to help with alignment.
Yeah, right. It tacks it. Yeah. So the flux, really, I use it as glue, literally, a lot of times, and especially with bigger parts, like if you want to switch for me, camera 4. So like this big MCU right here. Which is basically the main guts, the processor, which is fine pitch and 4-sided. It's a quad flat pack. That I will, add this liquid flux on it, and then put the part on it, line it up under the microscope, and then let it sit overnight. And then it's solid. The next morning, it's not moving, and then I can come in and then solder it. And I can use drag soldering as a technique I use for those kind of parts, and it just doesn't move. The flux actually holds it in place. And so I've had really good luck soldering those parts that way.
I'll run into problems where it's like, I'll have it perfect, and then when I start drag soldering, it pulls it out of alignment, and then it's like, So I'm going to keep in mind that tacking it in place with a scope. That seems like it could have saved me a lot of stress.
Yeah, and I tack 2 opposing corners is typically what I do. And then it won't move. Then you can go drag solder and you're good to go.
Stibbins asked, what temperature do you use for leaded solder?
So this particular soldering setup I'm using from McCoy it's basically auto controlled. This doesn't have a temperature setting on it. The longer you hold the tip on the surface, it actually pushes more heat and energy into the joint. So if you've got a really big component you're soldering, it actually pushes more heat into it. So this is sort of an exception, because this is I think is for manufacturing actually.
Okay.
So I don't know what the if I had a temperature control, I'm not sure what the optimum temperature would be for this particular solder. That's probably in the data sheet for it, but I just don't have to deal with that because this MetCal is sort of automatic when it comes to temperature. If that makes sense.
Anybody else know what temperature they use for their leaded solder?
For the unleaded, right?
Or for the leaded? Someone was asking for the leaded solder. What's the temperature they should be at?
Leaded 750.
I'm at 750.
Cool.
I just looked at mine. I just looked at mine. I'm at
750.
I think we got a consensus. Yeah.
Yeah. Number 4 on my hobby Weller iron.
Yeah, there we go.
What is that?
Yeah, I like turn it till it works.
Yeah.
That's good.
The other thing to note with this MetCal is these tips are interchangeable. This particular tip is for SMD, and so it also, I guess, there's a temperature parameter associated with the different tips. So some tips run hotter, some run cooler. So I don't know what this tip runs at, but it's a SMD specific tip.
Right. I have a question. So I know I asked you this like 2 years ago, I guess. For people getting into DIY, should they start with SMD or should they go the through hole, which is like the
Do you want my real answer?
real answer?
I just skip through hole. Through hole drives me nuts.
Well, you're going to have to do through hole anyway, where the panel components come in. So
Yeah.
you might as well just learn both. I agree with you.
Yeah. I know. If you want to build a clouds, which to me is like incredibly rewarding to build a really cool, useful, functional module like clouds, which is all SMD, that's an amazing accomplishment if you can build one of these. And it's not that hard. If you take your time and work through it, you can do it. And it's just an amazing feeling to build something that's a useful module.
Yeah.
When I started, I was hand wiring all of the panel components on Music from Outer Space thing. So, like, to see it come to this is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that was my first kit. Was an Alien Screamer.
Oh yeah. And then some of you all got started with, or I think it's circuit bending and stuff. So how did you get started into? I wanted to kind of go around the table and see how you got started into even building DIY kits. Like, was it? Did you mean to get into it, or did it happen, or were you trying to fix something? How did that all start for you?
I'm trying to remember. I just wanted to build a module myself, so I think I bought a kit, actually. I think I bought a Befacco crush delay. It was one of the first things I built. And found it very straightforward. They have great instructions, by the way. So if you build, modules, you can certainly buy them as a kit. They come with all the parts, instructions. A lot of them are great. But then I started adventuring out. I want to build a ripples, and then I think I built the ripples after that, and then I obviously had to learn how to surface mount to do that. So I just kind of experimented and played around with different boards, basically. What do I want to say? Like throwaway boards. I took other junky boards that I was working on because I fixed stuff too, and so I just experimented on it. I took parts off, put parts back on, and just kind of taught myself how to surface mount solder by using existing boards I had. But really, the drive was just to have. I wanted a ripples filter, so I built one.
What about you all? How did you all get started into building?
So this was mine. I brought it. Holy.
What did you ask?
I'm just throwing it out there. We can go with you, Keith. How did you get into DIY?
Well, I had already been a professional music producer, composer for a decade, and I wanted tone. I wanted a real filter instead of VSTs and plugins. And I ran into a friend in São Paulo who had built himself some giant modulars, and he gave me a bunch of U-Synth boards. And when I was a kid, when I was around 12 or so, I had gotten into some soldering, some really basic circuits and stuff. So I thought, hey, let me give this thing a try, right? But I'm going to need a power supply. So he told me to get into the Music from Outer Space website to get a power supply for my U-Synth boards. And when I went there, first thing I saw was the SoundLab Mark II mini synthesizer, and I said, "What the hell? It's a whole thing in just one board." So and this was after I had done like about a year of building Atari Punk consoles, little twin T oscillators, noise generator, figuring out a way to mix them. So I discovered the active mixer with an op amp. So I had already built, like, combined different things in breadboards and just crazy hand wiring stuff. And I created a little thing called the Little Drone, which was an Atari Punk console, a little bass, which is a sine wave twin T oscillator, a noise generator, mixer, everything on one little box, interacting in the same board, but going crazy. And that's how I met Ray Wilson too, because the filter was the weird sound generator filter that I found online, and it wasn't working. So I talked to Ray, I wrote to him, and he said, "Man, are you gonna make me troubleshoot over email? All right, just raise that input impedance into the LM13700 and the filter should work." So that's how I met my mentor, my guru. I raised it to a 1 mega ohm resistor, and that filter worked, and that got me excited. Like, wow, I made this thing, I created this. So when I went finally to build my synth to use for my studio, for my professional work as a composer, I ended up like jumping ahead and just getting a whole synth. And that took me 2 or 3 months of going to mom and pop stores in downtown Mexico City and buying the wrong components and doing things like really backwards for a while. But after 2 months, I had this synthesizer that worked, and it was my prized possession, my joy in the world, and it opened up the whole like passion for DIY. After that, the next thing I wanted was a third oscillator, and then I said, okay, now it's time to get into that USynth. So I made it. Since I fell in love with the banana plug thing, I started looking into Surge as well, and I still think that should have been the de facto standard, not eurorack. For you, banana should have been the de facto standard, in my opinion. But anyway, that's how I built. I used 20 centimeter panels for my USynth, which is now called the Cosmo format. My friend Sam Battle uses the same size, and built that using to add some oscillators, filters, and all that. And that really opened up the whole spectrum for me. I've always been an experimental musician, but with acoustic instruments. I went to the University of Miami and New England Conservatory for improvisation and crazy experimental abstract stuff. So when I discovered the modular, which I did first as a sound engineer wanting a better filter, I then discovered a whole world of musical experimentation and sound discovery that I hadn't even known before. So the rest is history. It was a love affair forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a cool origin story. Jay, Will, Will, you tell me how you get. Jay, how did you get into start building stuff?
Yeah, so I guess for me it probably would have been circuit bending and destroying stuff at an early age. And I guess I was always I was attracted to, I don't know, I wasn't attracted to traditional synthesizers, nor did I really have access to them. I think it was the bizarre stuff that caught my fancy. And I actually remember, I don't know, it was maybe I remember seeing 4MS designs when they were actually 3MS, and they were publishing designs that were made to be built in like cardboard. You'd just take like cut off a piece of cereal box or something and print out the layout and stick the chips through. And I remember thinking that was absolutely remarkable, that they were just completely obliterating any barrier to entry. Just like, you have a cereal box, can you pick up a handful of components? And it was, I think, building some noisemakers and creating some noisemaker circuit bending stuff that eventually led to I guess the earliest maybe concrete ordinary synthesizer modules would have been the Ken Stone stuff. Ken Stone PCBs were maybe the only one of the few PCBs that you could actually like acquire, and you had to have them shipped from
Cat Girl Synth.
Australia. What's that? Yeah, CGS, exactly right. So yeah, I started out building like a monstrous 5U synthesizer and doing all of the front panels with bamboo, and that kind of got partially completed as things maybe became increasingly available over the years, and as I got maybe more interested in designing my own things and whatever. So I guess that's kind of my origin story.
What about you,
So
McCoy?
we're calling these origin stories now, so this
Yeah,
does that mean we're
yeah.
superheroes?
Yeah, exactly. The comic will come out soon. I was thinking, Jay McCoy, I was gonna ask you, well, if you had when did you start getting messing around with all this DIY stuff?
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I would say circuit bending as well. It's where I got my start. I wanted to get something from Rigazala, then I saw the price of he was charging, and then I just figured I should just do it myself. So I did a few of those, and then ended up getting a book from Nicholas Collins, the Handmade Electronic Music, I think the name of it is.
Classic.
Mm-hmm.
And it had like real simple schematics, just CMOS stuff. So I made like some sound generators out of there, like cascading oscillators. That's very reminiscent to some of the stuff that Starling ended up doing, just more of like a more precise sound. But so I kind of circuit bent those machines, and then I eventually kind of ventured into the DAW area and kind of got away from doing all the DIY stuff, and then eventually got back into it a little bit with when Modular Addict was around, and just buying kits and having it was nice because they had basically build stations at the shop, so you could just go in and buy a kit and then just chill out and build stuff. So then bug Logan while he's trying to work, and so it was fun.
Yeah.
I feel like it's interesting that a couple people have had sort of like mentorship contexts. Like for me, like I got the kit, but until I was around Jason regularly and until he could like help me out with stuff, I didn't really do anything with it. And like Quinca, it was really interesting to hear that like Ray Wilson really was kind of the one that like pushed you into like feeling empowered to like do stuff, you know? So I think it's interesting that like there's that mentorship and support aspect that kind of factors into everyone's origin story.
He had that love-hate relationship one has with that impertinent, cheeky student who asks bothersome questions all the time.
That's cool. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are probably feel something like, well, maybe not the love-hate part, but definitely the love part, like watching your channel and learning and getting some insight on building.
Thanks,
that's
man.
pretty awesome.
That's why I start by saying that I'm a synth DIY guy. I'm not the synth DIY guy, but I'm certainly one.
Yeah, every community should have one, for sure. SoCal, got any good origin stories over there?
Yep.
And I started so I could maintain a vintage synth collection.
There you go.
And then when I first got into eurorack, or when I was thinking about it, I decided that I would do all DIY as a way to prevent myself from like buying every new thing that came out. But it didn't really slow me down much. So
Did it work?
I just built everything that came out instead. So
That's funny.
and then went into standalone synths like the Jasper, the Wasp clone, and the Re 303 and the Yocto, and still a lot of eurorack pedals, just anything I can build.
That's kind of why I started the channel too. I couldn't really afford everything I wanted, so I said I better start making some promotional videos.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Traversy? How'd you get into it?
I don't know. I've always liked tinkering with things, and my wife, her stepfather is actually he's an electrical engineer, and he's one of the ones who designed the driving thing for Christopher Reeve. And he would come over, and so she soldered as a kid when they first started that business many years ago. Now they grew into a company and sold it. Sorry, dogs in the back. But anyway, we started soldering, and then as we started SoCal, and when we started to meet up with Abe and Justin, it was fun. So like just learning how to solder and building with these guys, like that gave me more motivation to continue between Brandy's stepdad and then these guys here. And Brandy always enjoyed soldering, even when she was a kid. When they, like I said, when they first started that company many years ago, and that's where she started learning how to. So she already knew how to solder, and so it was just a thing that we kind of did. It's a part of our. That's how we organically grew SoCal Synth Society, was by doing builds, by just hanging out and soldering together.
Nerding out.
Nerding out.
This is nerding out, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. How many you guys you've done a few DIY little get-togethers. So I remember
Yeah, I
seeing
mean,
those.
recently we built the Re 909. We finished that right before NowCon, and we are going to build the Re 808. And yeah, right, all of us are building that one. And then, but yeah, I mean, these guys I think solder a lot more than I do. Like I haven't done any surface mount stuff. Any surface mount things I typically have Justin help me out with that.
Chip it out.
Way more patient than I am. But yeah, I more enjoy it just as a way to hang out and
yeah,
and just always to be learning something like that. For me is important. You know, I always like the opportunity to learn how to do something, and whether it be mechanical or something like soldering.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing about modular synths is like it's you're always gonna be learning something, even if you build models and stuff. So and the DIY stuff just really aligns really well with it, I think.
For sure.
Abe, go ahead, tell us your origin story.
It's pretty similar to some of you guys. You know, I couldn't afford a lot of stuff, so I decided to learn how to build it. So, you know, I didn't really know too many people that were doing it. I just kind of took it upon myself to learn and figure things out. You know, there's a lot of forums, and you know, people are really, you know, friendly, and you know, they'll tell you whatever you need to know, whatever your questions you have. You know, they'll answer them for the most part. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty affordable it's more affordable to build it yourself than to, you know, have it pre-built, or you know, and plus you get the experience and the knowledge from it.
Yeah.
It's rewarding, you know, when you finish something and it works, and you can like put it in your case, and you know, like, hey, I built that thing.
Yeah.
For me, it even feels streamlined, and like it's one single process that you took all the way from collecting parts, putting them in a board, putting everything together, testing, calibrating, putting on those knobs, putting it in your system, connecting it to other modules, making music with it. It's all one single long thing.
I can dig it.
Helps you learn your instrument, just like any other technique, I feel like.
Yeah, that was a massive allure for me too. Was just that I really wanted to get more in touch with the fundamentals of what I was doing. It was very helpful to me to kind of like understand, well, what is a filter. Things like this are like, I think, I don't know, just really helpful for some kinds of people for their creative process.
Yeah.
Break it down to radical components.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I want to get to the performance here soon, so we can check out some music in a second here. But before we do that, since I got the Starling crew here, tell us real quickly how you went from like circuit bending and building, little kits and stuff, and then going into building your own line of modules and getting into that. Give us the origin story of Starling. Maybe that's what I'm asking.
Hi, I'm the chatty one. I'll start. So basically, like really like before any kind of like official company stuff, like Jason really did like provide like a serious amount of like mentorship for me when it came to like understanding electronics and like really like seeing that it was like possible to make your own instrument. Because beyond doing kits, like Jason has made all kinds of like things that are somewhere between like built from scratch on perf board to like hacked together devices that are connected in ways that weren't supposed to. And so like I kind of was osmosising that up, and then like I started to get ideas for, oh, I want this module for my system that I don't have. And so like kind of fast forwarding, we've done a couple projects together where we like hacked things together and made them like, we made this like video sampler thing out of like an old video hard drive that was like a really cool project. Like that, Jason and I just like dug that up the other day and we're like looking at it as like a sort of historical thing. But anyways, like I was like, oh, what if you could do like envelope generator where you could like chain a bunch of them together? And this was before Stages came out. And so basically like we just started working on that idea, and it ended up kind of like spiraling off into this sort of like programmable hardware platform module thing. And I think it just got to a point where we sunk so much time into it that it was like, why don't we actually try to like do this all the way and like make this something that we put forward for the public? And so that then it was sort of, that really like set things in motion, and it really like, it was kind of all about like VIO, which was like our first module. And so that was kind of like, we spent so much time thinking about what we wanted our ideal module to be. It was this interesting like crash landing experience to kind of like then put that out into the world. And so I think that's kind of where we're at now, is like figuring out sort of what new directions we want to take and this and that. But yeah, I don't know. That's like roughly a history of how we got started. Jay, you can chip in.
It was definitely like a meeting grounds for Will and myself, for sure, because my default kind of activities in the studio here has been to create really proprietary, particular things that further like my own whatever, like personal projects, which tend to span the gamut of a lot of things. Like it's not just traditional synthesis. I do a lot of stuff with video, and I the idea of just making music to me isn't really like, doesn't seem like a perfect fit. I feel like I kind of like to straddle a bunch of different media, which is why I think that the modular synthesizer was always alluring to me. It allowed me not to have to settle on, oh, well, this is just a device for making music. So I think that Will and I collaborating together was kind of a nexus to kind of start thinking about maybe something that makes more sense to a larger audience than just myself. And I think that's
still
kind
has
of
that
why,
kind of character too.
Yeah. I think that's kind of, it was a lot of that. I think it was like, it's been the
bespoke nature.
What's that?
Bespoke, hackery kind of, exactly. Like something that really does have its own, like something that I would say something about our stuff that is like, important to highlight is like, it really comes directly from just like both of us, like doing our creative things, like me making beats. Yeah, and then like Jason has done all sorts of wonderful things that include like a musical sound aspect, but also a video aspect. And like one way that I describe it is it's like interconnecting different devices and like using something that can like sequence things in unexpected ways. And so like there's definitely a strong aspect of that in anything that we kind of do, like stuff that can like taking clock signals and like maybe it can sequence some video modules, maybe it can do all kinds of different stuff, and sort of like empowering the user through kind of like having options and being able to like solve problems that exist in a weird domain of like kind of hacking together old trash to make like music stuff. So there's a big part of that in what we make too, just kind of like reflecting our own creative processes.
Like
Yeah, no, I think I for sure, I think a big part of the reason why I think we try to do a lot of like DIY outreach and make our stuff available through that mechanism is because, like, to me it's really important because it's very like close to just everything I do. I want to see what we do open-ended enough where people can actually like not only take something and make it themselves, but also make it for themselves, hack it, extend it. Not just we have the definitive idea of what this thing is supposed to be and you can reproduce it. It's much more the repurposing of all this stuff that goes on in here, to me, seems like a natural extension of how I would like to have a company that supplies things that go beyond just our initial intention.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. We should get into it in the second half of the show. I definitely wanted to kind of one of the reasons why I wanted you all to be on, because I think
Yeah,
what
that
we're
seems
talking
like
about-
that'll be a good segue for the backpacks. Like I don't think y'all brought that up just yet.
the backpacks.
I was talking to Jay, the backpack.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say,
Are you going to do a performance
Yeah,
here? Or what's
I
going
guess
on?
so.
yeah, he did.
Yeah, let's keep things rolling.
What's the best?
Yeah, we'll get back into it. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about like open source. But one thing I wanted to hit on real quick, one of the reasons why I wanted Starling on here is because I think when I was thinking about DIY and I was thinking about the kits and all the soldering stuff, which is great to know too. It's interesting to remember that somebody had a DIY synthesizers and stuff at the beginning, like that whole process of like coming up with something on your own to kind of build it literally with no kit, with no no instruction, with no manual. I think that's also something that I think is really remarkable, and I want to kind of just applaud uh, organizations like Starling that are like, hey, we came up with an idea, and then you also took it to the next level where you're making it so people can build off of that. So it's a nice ecosystem that you've created, and not just like a closed off module, which is sometimes the case for whatever reason because of the nature of business. But I think it's awesome that you all did that. But I also really want to recognize that people are out there building stuff from scratch, the original DIY definition.
Mhm.
So props.
Yeah,
all
I
right.
mean, I get like chills when I think about like Surge, or like the Luneta system. So if people aren't familiar with like how Surge got started or like what Luneta is, you should look that stuff up because it's like major DIY inspo.
Yeah, if it gives you the
Surge is
chills.
still doing it too.
Still going. Yeah. All right. So I want to make sure Jay McCoy gets a chance to perform. Uh, and then afterwards we can kind of break down your patch real quick. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna mute, if everybody can mute their mics, and then I'll go ahead and make you the solo layout. All right, go ahead. You got it. Jay McCoy, everybody. Yeah. Dope.
Sweet.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I'm gonna speak this up a little bit so I can hear you. Right on. Thanks, everybody. That's Jay McCoy in the place to be.
Thank you.
Right on. That was cool. So tell us real quickly what was going on there. I feel like I heard some Sync 3 oscillator 3s in there.
There was actually, it was based around 2 pairs of the OS3 and Sync 3s. So the Sync 3, each Sync 3 was connected to both of the OS3s. Oh, let's see, do that. So basically, yeah, it was like 2 pairs of this this duet here, the OS3 and the Sync 3.
Nice.
And since they have quantizers built in, basically just had this one set to like tune to E, and then this guy up here was tuned to G, so it was just playing off of each other, and it was just basically going through different ratios, and so these were basically doing the harmonic oscillator stuff. So send that through a bunch of delay, and it just sounds real massive.
Yeah.
So, and then there was, I had 2 metas that were also hard synced in there. So those were kind of doing some dirty filter sweep sounds. That's what that ended up being. And then I started repatching them, and then that never got anywhere. And then some triggering from the gate seek here. That was all coming from the temps utile. I have that hooked up off camera to my Korg vocal bass, because that's always my main clock, because there's a digital readout on it. So this is always what my tempo, like this is how I always decide where my tempo is going to be.
There you go.
And I just send the sync out from that to the system. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Yeah, next time you're in Colorado, I'll hook you up with a missing link, one of those cool clocks. Not that there's anything wrong with the bass vocal, for sure.
Yeah, that was just like some workaround I kept using.
Yeah.
And it accepts MIDI in. I don't know. So you have to take a look at what you're talking about, of course.
Yeah. Next time I'll have to show it to you. Or watch last episode. Think we talked about it. But anyhow, that was awesome performance.
Thank you.
That was really cool. So some folks might not have seen all the Starling stuff. Let me just point out. I'm going to pull this up real quick so people know what we're talking about. Remember. Yeah. So.
Get this out of the way.
Yeah, so this is what we were just talking about, folks. This is the Sync 3 and Oscillator 3, and if you haven't checked out the Starling platform, Starling Via platform, I guess this is probably a good time to kind of introduce that to folks so they understand what the idea is behind here. So maybe Jay and Willie want to talk a little bit about what's what.
Well.
Yeah, can you hear my mic okay?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think you guys gave me some blank panels at NobCon.
Yeah, you did the most amazing video. I never got a chance to say that. That touched my heart when I saw that. That was awesome. So yeah, basically like VIA is a module that can be kind of confounding to explain. So I'm gonna do my best. And really what it is it's a simple little analog utility circuit with 2 analog VCAs and a mixer, and that is digitally controlled. So that's kind of the most like nuts and bolts way of explaining it. And then this configuration, this configuration basically set off this flurry of inspiration where Jason and I thought of so many ideas for how to control that core circuit to do useful things that it spawned the 7 modules that make up the VIA family. So that's what we're looking at. So you might notice that all of the knobs and jacks are in the same place on all these modules. That's because they all share the same circuit board. It's just that the modules are a unique pairing of a faceplate and a firmware, and sort of a whole kind of and that makes a sort of a particular tool for generating signals. So like one good place to start if you're like, okay, how about something concrete, is the ATSR module was kind of designed later down the line to really present like the most straightforward introduction to kind of how these VIA modules can make and shape CVs. And so I would say that if you're curious about these and want to actually spend some time looking, that might be a good one to kind of sort of try to wrap your head around. Basically what it does here is it creates a envelope signal by crossfading between 2 analog signals. And so what that lets you do is it lets you create typical ADSR shapes, or I was kind of showing people this at KnobCon, you can do sort of nifty crossfades between different modulation sources. So like you can fade in an LFO and then have that go to a steady voltage, or you can fade in one LFO and then crossfade to another one that's slower, something like that. And really those types of patches are kind of what lets you make really, that's kind of where the VIA name came from, is it's like the modules kind of let you go from one source to another and kind of make all sorts of interesting musical contours. And so just like to zoom this out, like for folks who aren't as deep into the modular world, you know, if you have like a simple oscillator and a filter, making an interesting sound can be done by like modulating the cutoff of the filter, the pitch of the oscillator. And I think we've found that most of the fun of using modular synths is creating interesting and unique modulation signals. And I would say that's where the VIA system really excels. But we're big fans of Surge. And so if you know Surge, you know that a lot of those modules can be used for audio or modulation. It just depends on how fast they're going. And so, you know, that's why they were able to make a lot of the sounds that you heard in John's performance. So I don't know if that explained anything at all. I'm going to stop now before I get any further. And maybe we'll see people have questions or where we should go from here.
No, that's good. No, I think that's a pretty good thing. I think what I want to kind of, since we're talking more about DIY, and I wanted to get into the platform stuff. So just so people know, you can build your own, right?
Yes, absolutely. So Modular Addict had the kits, and we've got this whole, like I did a video for each thing. So we wanted it to be a build that would be accessible for someone's first time. So this is one of those situations where all the surface mount stuff is pre-populated. So you would start with just like the headers and the pots and the jacks and stuff like that. So definitely we were thinking of DIYers. And then what I'm kind of working on right now is a sort of set of editors so that it's easier to kind of hack what's inside the modules digitally, so that you could change the wavetables, so that you can change the harmonics that the Sync 3 will generate. And yeah, so definitely our goal when we were making these was to make something that people could get as deep inside of as they could possibly want. So we have all the schematics published, all the codes open source, yada, 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 that kind of approach.
That's cool. So just to kind of just to kind of go back. So if you get a VIA, you could swap out the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And you could also, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you can also hack it or build your own.
Yeah. So up to your skill as a programmer versus my skill as a programmer with making something clean and easy to hack. So, right now, I would say that with the way that things are now, there are probably other better places to start if you want to like hack your own music devices. Like I plug the Electrosmith Daisy here. Like that's a really, really cool product that I think like did what we were trying to go for. What'd you say?
I said the Bifaco Lich is a good one too. The
Yep,
owl.
yep, exactly. So there's and the owl, the Hoxton owl, right? So there's a number of things like that, exactly. And this is one where I think, I'm never going to sugarcoat it. Like I don't think that it's as accessible of programmable hardware platform as maybe we wanted it to be at the start. But I mean, that's okay because I think the modules are great on their own. And what I'm working on developing right now is kind of a happy medium between writing code and just using them as is, right? So, for example, one of the modules, it makes envelopes that are actually wavetables. And so I'm working on an editor that will allow you to edit the wavetables so that you could make your own envelope shapes and sort of hack the module without needing to know any C or C++. So that's something that's kind of still provisional, but then when I'm done with that, then I feel like I could safely say it'll be something that people can like hack and sort of like get into and change the DNA of. So hopefully that is done in the next couple months here. I've been working on that all summer.
That's awesome. That's cool. So speaking kind of on just the whole open source stuff, just want to kind of just see like how everybody feels or any opinions or thoughts on how that's affected the DIY community. I mean, feel free, anybody wants to start. Is it like a hot topic no one wants to talk about?
Well, it's inspiring. I mean, it definitely, like, I don't think I would have started doing any of this if it wasn't for Mutable Instruments being so forward with all of their quote unquote intellectual property and kind of the whole community around it. Like, I think the biggest thing with open source is that if you don't have certain resources for people, then people aren't necessarily going to use the open source and kind of mutate it into something else. It might instead be something that's more of like just like a way of kind of recreating the same device. And so I think that's what I'm most interested in is like, how can open source be done in a way that actually like invites people to make real super substantial modifications to the source material, because I think that's like an actually like deceptively hard thing to do. So that's kind of my 5 cents on the topic.
Yeah, I totally agree with. I mean, obviously, I would agree with where he's coming from. I think we have a lot of similarities in that regard. But yeah, it's like definitely, I think we're less interested in. Not that I think we've got any problem with people recreating our designs, but that's not what makes doing this stuff exciting and interesting. It's like I think to come to something that you've done and be surprised by what someone else has done with it is just an extraordinary thing. And like I think that's for me. I mean, that's always I don't know. That's always the inspiration that I've gotten from the DIY world has been, like what can I glean from what's out there and how can I use that to do what hasn't been done yet? Because that's the stuff that I find personally to be fulfilling, and I love it when other people do that as well.
Or at least what hasn't been done too much.
Yeah. Or in a certain way, exactly.
Yeah, because something that you all were talking about earlier with origin stories, you were looking at schematics, you were looking at, I guess, old school open source, stuff that was shared, and then you built off of that. Or like they said, Quinca's like somebody doesn't, like no one's making that circuit or no one ever really made too many of these. There wasn't that many, so you could build that schematic out. But now we're kind of in a different world where everything's like on GitHub or whatever, and it's just that whole I guess plus and minuses.
Yeah, there's always been things that were sort of informally open source, like the Atari Punk console, which is actually the step tone generator by Forrest Mims from the Radio Shack books. So I mean, there is an author. There probably are rights to it, but I don't think he ever even thought to charge them. It's just something that's out there. The Richard Collins books, things also. So there's a lot of stuff that was just considered education in early circuit design for music making, that you can use and reuse and find new ways to integrate and create fun new things with it. So even at that level, there's still like a universe of timelines that can exist as far as the music you can make with that stuff. So where we're at right now, I think we're much more advanced in the technology than we are in the music that can be made with it. Mm-hmm. Like there needs to be a catching up, because we have like infinite possibilities literally right now. And as musicians and artists with this stuff, I think we're just finding our way. We're swimming our way through the vessels of this stuff. So that's going to be exciting to see too. You know, I think we don't even need to create that much stuff that hasn't been done before. Let's watch a little bit maybe bring the book idea down a little bit more to make things more approachable to the musician, to the instrumentalist, to the person who's actually going to take that into an artistic trip or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know where I'm going.
No,
I'm good point.
Yeah, I'm digging where you're going with it, because I think you're right. There is, I think about something like granular synthesis, where it seems pretty kind of newish. I mean, you know, when Clouds was
nobody
around,
really got all that Clouds had to offer, you know. And
yeah, we barely scratched the
one.
surface. Yeah, and now we have, you know, the Ferraris of granular synthesis that are out there, you know, and like you can get it, and everyone, the processing power is so crazy. But you're totally right. Like, how are musicians using it? How are they exploring it? It's super early days. In the scheme,
it's kind of like microtonality. I remember when I was studying microtonality, and it sounded like shit, you know. And my teacher was like, he would say, "Hey, relax, everybody, because we're in the stone age of this stuff. Yeah, so it's gonna sound like shit for centuries." But eventually, you know, our great grandchildren will make glorious microtonal music.
Interesting.
I couldn't agree more. I feel the same way just about modular synth music as a whole. Like, I feel like because you're listening to it so much and you're thinking about all these things, and you know, I try not to let the process get too much in my head when I'm listening to music, but it definitely my awareness of it and what I'm listening to is expanded beyond just three chords being played over and over again. So I think I hear what you're saying. I feel like it's super, like, I'm figuring it out, and it's sounding really cool to me, probably for a lot of different reasons. It'd be interesting to see like where that music, how music gets
a lot
evolved.
of it, I think, is very personal. It's personal discovery. It's just you with your speakers in bathing in sounds that you're making. It's not really about expressing yourself artistically and sharing it with the world necessarily for a lot of the process. So I understand that too. You know, I understand that the fascination with just the technology and with having this device that you can patch together and create weird sound waves just for your own pleasure and enjoyment. It's different even than music production, composition, performance, etc. But on another level, there, even if you do consider it its own separate art form from music.
Right there at the pause.
The suspense is killing me.
I know.
That was going to be a good point.
Like, he's really thinking it through.
All right. Well, hopefully he'll come right back in, and he's just frozen in time. It was so good. The outside forces have shut him down. That's joking.
Well, I think there's like an interesting thing that Quinca has mentioned that like I think of is like, how could like open source be an educational tool that helps musicians catch up to the technology? Like that's maybe how I would like synthesize all these ideas together, is like, you know, because I think that I mean that's how it worked for me. You know, is basically all of the mixture of educational and open source and this and that, all the stuff that like ripped open the guts of the synth allowed me as a musician to see what I could do with the technology and kind of like allowed me to absorb that into my creative process or whatever. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think anything that tries to address that is like gonna like push things forward and like ultimately make the community like healthier and happier in the long run.
Yeah, well, I definitely feel you there. I mean, I think it's interesting watching a lot of modular synth stuff, performances, and then quickly having a breakdown. You just don't see that in shows very often. I mean, you don't go to a rock concert and go, "Hey, that was my Gibson, and we were doing this, and we're messing." It'd be a very long show, but like I mean, but we're used to it. I think it is that educational part of it that's really cool. You guys were mentioning mentorships as well. Like, it's really cool to share, and you learn so much when you're teaching somebody something yourself. So I dig it. I think it's. I mean, I think it's to kind of go back to like the whole point of like wanting to do this show or doing DIY shows in general is just I love that idea of that we're creating like Kinka said, like creating something from the beginning and like this building something up and making your own instrument. And when you're not doing DIY, which I don't necessarily, I still get that vibe from just piecing together and modules, and making my own instrument. So to take it to even go more meta and get into like the actual building it and stuff like that, and then even go further back and then even designing a module, it's pretty awesome. All that, there's a lot of energy and momentum going into just getting a tone.
No, I think you're absolutely right though. Like I think it's hard to put where does the continuum of DIY actually begin and end, because even for those people who have to put together a system, a modular system, isn't that like DIY
Yeah.
instrumentation? Like you're making a DIY it's yours. You've crafted it yourself, even if you didn't design it from the ground up. And there's a whole continuum of this work that goes on. I think it's where people choose to dip in, where they make their boundaries and what's important for them. But I feel like the whole modular space has that going.
Kinkus, you're back. Sorry we lost you. You were
the battery died. I thought I had it plugged in, but the MagSafe thing disconnected. Anyway, sorry. I left you guys hanging on the precipice of suspense.
I don't
even remember what I was gonna say.
The universe is cruel that way.
I think you left it at.
I was saying, even if we do consider it a separate art form from normal music, so to speak, it's still the musicianship aspect, the compositional aspect is a few decades behind the technological advancements, because the technology has the allure of the gas syndrome and the purchase power and etc. So it's a good business to make instruments that people that will probably never really master them will buy, but then one or two people will build, and that's what I'm curious about. That's what I want to see in some years. Like, what is somebody going to actually do that's going to blow our minds with this stuff? So that's.
Well,
that's
I mean,
it.
have you not downloaded my albums yet? Maybe I just got to send you some codes.
I have not. That's probably the problem.
That's a problem. I'll circle back with you and drop some download codes.
Please.
No, I hear you though. It's cool. I mean, I am always amazed what people are coming up with, and then looking at how people are patching it up is even more interesting. But when someone says, "Yeah, I built that," I'm like, "Well, that's pretty cool. it's pretty awesome."
And then you get to design. It reminds me of that joke about the goat farming, right? The guy's like, "Oh, no, I'm not going to use presets on my drum machine anymore. In fact, I'm not going to use my drum machine anymore. I'm going to play real drums. And I'm actually going to build my own drums and I'm gonna stretch my own calf skins. And like, so how's the drumming going? Well, not much time with all the goat farming and all.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how I feel sometimes about. I'm always making music with my modular, but it's always for videos of modules that are coming. And I'm looking at my system like, when am I gonna get to do something that just like I want to do, you know, because all the time I have in the studio, it's kind of like the goat farming conundrum. I'm not really making my music right now yet because I'm goat farming.
Well, when I was doing stuff for Modular Addict, I kind of had that like situation, so I just started filming my recording sessions. So I was just killing two birds with one stone.
That's
after
a
a
good
while.
idea.
Just like, oh, this is a song I like, I'm gonna keep it. I might as well just film it and then, you know, chop it up to film later. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up dealing with that situation.
Yeah, you gotta be efficient. You know, make efficient, intelligent choices with what you do with your time these days.
Yeah.
Quinca, what's the number one question you always get about DIY?
Oh, why do you solder through hole resistors from the top, Quincas? That's the top question, because I learned that from Ray Wilson. He told me in an email that he learned in the NASA soldering training camp that if you, as long as you're using through hole board that has plated through holes, it's designed to be able to be soldered from the top, and you don't have to spread out the resistor legs or have them fall out or get loose or anything. You just solder everything from the top. So I learned that from him, and I've been doing it in my videos, and it seems to be a revolutionary thing. Most people are like, how? But don't you damage the components? Or no, you just turn it over and clip off the leads. I touch up a little bit because sometimes there's a little bit too much or too little on the other side. And it's just one of those little things that I learned that made life easier. But yeah, sorry to disappoint you. It's not a big question.
No, it's good. It's a good nerdy one. It's a good.
Yeah.
Everybody here is just nodding their heads like, okay. Oh yeah. Well, I didn't realize he went to NASA soldering school.
Ray did. Yeah, he was a NASA authorized instructor or solderer or something like that. I think Paul Schreiber is as well, instructor.
Oh,
wow. Yeah, those are the real superheroes.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's what the F really stands for in NASA, soldering. Maybe I'm about to get down to it. Check Wikipedia. That's awesome. That's cool.
Things have to survive the harshness of outer space.
Yeah.
That's probably why the synthesizers were called music from outer space.
Yeah, it lines up. It all lines up. It all tracks. That's fun. But before we wrap up, and any other thoughts about DIY you may want to get off their chest?
Oh, we did want to share this little bit of DIY progress that we've been making. It's partly for our own process and partly, hopefully, for the community at large. But we've been making these we call them backpacks. They're these little circuit blocks. Let me show you what they look like. We're not the only one. I mean, Electrosmith is doing this too, and I'm guessing, Will, do you know of anyone else that's working along these lines? Oh wait, this is not scaled right. Here.
Okay, I'll switch over to yours.
Oh, yeah. So this is a backpack. They're designed to be. They're slightly smaller than like a 4 HP width. And they have 0.1 inch spacing, so they fit perfectly into a breadboard. And they're basically like circuit blocks. Here's another one. They're circuit blocks that are they're functionally complete minus a power supply.
Like tenuverter.
Yeah, they all have. Inverting node inputs, meaning that you can connect pots or CVs to the inputs of these via resistors, and you can mix several inputs together. So you basically need very, very little additional circuitry beyond what's on here to make these functionally complete. And so we've got different modules. This one is a complete state variable filter. We've got a dual VCA. This one here is a dual VCA, and you can kind of see the idea here. This is a prototype module that we have. And this just plugs in via this little header here to a board that requires minimal additional circuitry. So it took us very little effort to get the rest of this circuit figured out. And it kind of allows us to take circuit blocks that we would be redesigning and relaying out again and again. And it allows us to work kind of at like one step higher in the process where, oh, we need 8 VCAs for this design, or we want a pair of VCFs or whatever. We can easily experiment with the idea or make something that's a one-off out of these. And so our intention is to kind of pass this stuff at some point in the near future along to the DIY community. We'd love to see people build things with these and learn from them. There's nothing exceptionally, there's no special mojo to them per se. They're not, exotic and super exciting as a design goal. They're designed to be useful circuit blocks that allow you to kind of work at a higher level of abstraction.
That's so cool because you can make like a backstage modular behind the fixed panel and create your own hardwired synthesizer with these things.
Right.
That's awesome. That's like modular. Yeah.
Yeah, they're sub modules. That's exactly what it is. And so we've been working on a project for a little while now that is this stereo modular system that uses TRS 3.5 millimeter TRS cables to patch. So everything actually expects stereo CV, stereo inputs. Everything has stereo outputs, and so you can patch the whole thing as a stereo system. And whether or not we ever make anything of it, it's kind of the bits that make the project approachable, even just as a prototype. So right now we've just been exploring it, not only in hardware but also in BCB rack as another way to prototype with this stuff. But yeah, I think we're very interested and open in sharing our process and extending the tools and resources like we're creating internally to people that are interested in what we're doing or interested in leveraging what we're doing. So this is just one step in that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had an idea for your stereo modules on the way up here. I was thinking you guys could make an oscillator that's just power chords. So, because you got 2, right? You just that's my dumb idea. But if you make a lot of money out of it, it's a great idea. So, either way, win-win.
In a lot of ways, actually. So the idea, and I mean, I'll just bounce this off of you guys if you're interested in commenting on it or whatever. But I think a lot of the idea, a lot of what makes sense to us isn't like a synthesizer in the traditional sense, like a synthesizer that functions as a synthesis block. Doesn't like it seems like it'd be a little bit extra of a thing to add, but it doesn't fundamentally need to be stereo. Like it's like the question would be like, is that a problem or a solution in search of a problem? Whereas I think that the stereo idea makes a lot more of a sense as a modular mixing or post-production
processing.
Signal processing.
Yeah, like a channel strip before your converters, basically. It's kind of
totally, because when you're patching in the modular, you can already be as multi-channel as you want. You just patch your voices anywhere. So making something stereo or not, even though right now we're in a moment of many stereo filters and stereo enhancers and stereo is in vogue right now. But in modular, if you think modularly, you can be Atmos, very easily.
Sure.
But
So
for
this is more
what you're saying as far as the signal processing, that makes total sense because most signals that you would process nowadays do have stereo content anyway. So like it hurts to have to sum them and plug them into a mono processor.
Yeah, it does.
Right, and let's say you're trying to accomplish stereo by duplicating modules, and now you've got to duplicate front panel controls, and you've got to have. This is just an attempt to make it feasible by not having to worry about anything like that. You just everything
make it easier. People will do it more too, you know, and go take that a step further. So.
Right.
So now we just need to get our asses together and do it.
Yeah, get up here, man.
I need to.
Yeah, I got to get off the pool and come back to the hotel room.
I know, come on.
But so for that reason, though, a lot of what we've designed for the backpack so far, we have a dual VCA module because, again, you know, doing things in duplicate. So a dual VCA, we have a panner. The pan law isn't perfect.
Does the dual VCA respond to a single CV control, for example? Good, right?
Yeah, it's all in how you wire it up, right?
Right, exactly. Right. It's just the backpack.
Right, and right. So we've tried to make it as obvious as possible. The submodule itself should, we've made some assumptions about what signal levels should be standardized. So there's some level of trying to make it into like I don't want to call it a platform, but in the sense that making the same assumptions about all of these things. And
one more standard to choose from.
Well, we're trying to conform to the standards that already exist. So, for example,
that makes total
CV.
sense.
So, for CV, for example, if you want to input a CV signal, you use a 100K resistor. It gives you a 100K input impedance, and it expects like 0 to 5 volts or 5 volts to negative.
Pretty much the de facto standards for a lot of eurorack anyway. It's just a matter of like putting them down and saying, let's stick to that now. I think about that a lot. About like if somebody had like the global power to decide, look, let's just do it. Red stripe down, shrouded headers, motherfuckers, 100K impedance. What would you do? What would your a dictatorial format parameters be?
You're an idea there, and I know some roughnecks. We can enforce those things because you can tell people what to do all day long, but they don't want to do it, and I gotta call the boys in.
The galaxy brain idea is that if everybody's just making their own modules out of these submodules, then people can just come up with their own standards, and all they have to do is enforce them with themselves. And then it's just what do you do from there?
That's true. I mean, the thing is, like, you're enforcing your own standards is always an issue. Ask everybody who starts off by only buying one module, one case. So
I'm going to stay in this ecosystem.
I'm going to stay in this ecosystem, exactly. I'm not going to get anything else but, and then there you go.
Yeah, good luck, buddy.
Good luck. Yeah. Good luck. That's awesome. Well, that's super exciting. So I dropped your link in the chat, but people should definitely keep track of what's going on at Starling. You have so much going on, and definitely want to experiment more with the VIA stuff for sure. So we're gonna have to do some more like that. Quinca's got to get some VIA so you can see what you do with it.
I'll send some over. I'll make some videos.
There you go. See, he's like, you can't stop making videos. You gotta make some music.
I know. I'll find a comfortable balance. Well, the thing is, the cool thing about having to make videos of everything is that I have to learn the shit out of these modules. Yeah. Like I don't have the luxury to just buy something and not know how to use it. I have to learn. So I feel like I'm going through like education right now. At some point, I'm just gonna say, "Fuck it," you guys keep the legacy channel, and I'm just gonna make sounds now.
There you go. Yeah, I hear you.
You don't have to film ours. You can just play with them. That's the deal.
There you go. See, it's friendly. Yeah, I mean, I watched the Geronolog videos. Those are deep, man. I was thinking, geez, he must have spent like a month in a shack just learning all those things.
Yeah, I usually take I tell all my partners, give me at least 2 months with the thing, because there's just. You just can't really know a module until you've eaten a sack of salt with it.
Yeah.
Facts.
I hope
so
the analogy made sense to everybody. Sorry.
One more thing I wanted to mention though about these backpacks is if anyone out there is interested, we don't really have a strong coherent plan right now, but we have a kind of early initiative going right now. We're trying to start a Discord server for Starling, and we want to, if anyone's interested, hop on our server and just let's chat. And the part of the point of our server is definitely like not just whatever, an outlet for company stuff or whatever. We want it to actually be a space where we can kind of maybe collaborate and communicate with people on DIY stuff specifically. So if you've got a question about this stuff, you want to get a hold of it, you got ideas, you just want to see our process, we're trying to be, kind of like maybe more transparent about what we do. Like we have no desire for opaqueness. We just we haven't had good outlets for sharing that we feel strongly about. So this is the thing we're trying right now to kind of like, everybody's welcome.
Yeah,
Very
we'll
cool.
drop the
Very
link to your Discord in our Discord to help get that convo getting.
Yeah, we do voice chats on there a lot too, so there's a good chance we're just kind of on there and bullshit.
Yeah, let's chat
Right.
it up.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. Well, let me just check in with SoCal real quick. How's the building going over there? Did you guys wrap it up?
Yep.
Yeah, we're wrapping up.
Finish.
Tell them what you finished. Yeah.
What did you guys build? Did I ask them what they were building? I didn't know if I did.
No.
Pharmasonic. It's the Moog Taurus filter.
I think that's the same one in my Frequency Central product.
Oh, okay. What else did you guys build? That's
Quinca. I mean, this was all pre-SMD. I just pretty much jacks.
Nice black square there.
Yeah.
You could make it.
I can't really see.
yeah.
Oh, that looks cool. Yeah. That's a really cool black square.
Finish the black square.
I was working on the look mom, no computer modules. Just
nice.
kind of work on those.
Oh, cool. Yeah, shout out to him, man. He's also there's a DIY cat right
Yeah.
there. Jeez, Luis. He's doing a lot. That's awesome. We built some stuff around here too. What did we build, guys?
Built some molds.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh yeah, that's what I forgot to mention. We were building these waveform kits, the catwalks. Patchwork sent over some kits for us to build today. Oh, sweet. Thank you. Awesome. And this is what we got. I don't know what they got. Boom.
Oh, I think I did on the patch.
Yeah.
See that? I don't know. Well, this is the worst. This is why I'm never gonna take Quinca's job. See, I'm like this.
Man, if you guys knew how many takes I have to throw out because I forgot to turn on the audio or I forgot to turn on one of the cameras where I stumbled upon my own tongue. It's like
That's
7 million takes.
Well, the cool thing about these is that they don't mount. They're 0 HP, so they would mount like underneath your kit. So if anyone's seen those before, they're pretty
Those that go on
I
top.
think the one makes attenuators too, like that, right? There's like
yeah,
zero
exactly,
HP.
yeah, they make attenuators and.
I made a video about some of these. I call them the patch pals, the passive patch pals.
Yeah.
You can make little attenuators, clock combiners, things like that. Passive mixers.
Passive, yeah.
You can see his little black box back there. Carol built a Rampage. Look at that thing. Look at man. You know what? I'll tell you what. Rampages look so sexy. I don't care what they say.
It was my first kit. The first kit I ever built was a Rampage. After
So awesome.
after the Sound Lab stuff.
Brandon built a ribbon. There's a catwalk ribbon, which I'm excited about because I'm going to use it. Yeah, that was your first modular kit. Awesome. Well, shout out to Patchworks and Waveform Magazine for hooking us up and helping us. And big shout out to Building 61 here in Boulder. If you're in Boulder, if you're in Colorado, you should just drive down here and check out the makerspace here. They had a whole bunch of stuff here. Adam and Robbie over there in the back hanging out.
Looks really awesome.
Yeah, it looks legit. Looks like we know what we're doing.
Can you tell me? So what's their this building 61? I think someone mentioned it last time I was out there. What's their model? Is it like?
Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Jump in.
Yeah, jump in. Tell us a little bit about building 61.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Adam from Building 61, one of the creative technologists here. We're a free community makerspace. Robbie is walking behind me here. He's runs the wood shop side of things, but we do a bunch of cool stuff. So it's totally free. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we're open from 1 to 6:45 p.m. You get access to all the cool stuff that's in the space. So behind me here, that's the electronics bench, tons of individual components, little circuit board, etcher, diagnostic tools, kind of the works. We have 2 laser cutters, 6 3D printers, sewing machines, screen printing equipment, kind of everything that you would want to make cool projects, especially in this world. So there's a lot of room to make some pretty interesting musical stuff. And plus the wood shop that's behind the wall is just incredible. We've got a full setup there. Robbie could probably talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a full-on wood shop, table saw, a couple of band saws, joiner planer, edge sander, drum sander, spindle sander, routers, hand tools, most of what you would need to do woodworking projects.
Yep, and a 5x8 foot CNC machine, which I used for my own system, so I built the case hardware on the sides of it. Pretty excellent tool, but it's all for free, and we're here.
Yeah, awesome resources. Totally
This
cool.
is free? What the
Yeah,
hell?
it's
Can
free.
you guys open one in Mexico?
No, man, you gotta come out here. You gotta come out here. You gotta.
How are you guys funded? Is it an ONG or something?
So we're funded, we're a part of the library here, so we're at Boulder Public Library. We got an initial grant from a group called the Boulder Library Foundation to buy all the initial tools and services. We worked really hard for about a year, and we got full city funding to just keep going forward with this. So we offer
That's
regular
amazing.
programs. Yeah, just like a library, just a different type of program.
Yeah, libraries aren't just books.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
It's awesome. It's a really amazing space. We're hoping to do, some more DIY stuff. I mean, at some point, it'd be great to do some case building out here, maybe some panels, But so if you're in the area, definitely hit them up because there's so much to get into, right?
Yeah.
Man, I want to make a pyramid resonator over there with you guys.
Let's do it.
I don't know what that is, but let's do it. Yeah, sounds good. That sounds good. Is it legal? I don't know. Who cares?
Figure it out.
Figure it out.
It's not paraphernalia. Come on.
Well, this is Colorado, so you gotta, that wouldn't be surprising. Anyhow. Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, so Building 61, a big shout out for them helping us put this together. Thanks, Bryce, for coming down and talking. And
Yeah, he is.
so much. Yeah, there he is. This is the man. Check out
Yeah,
his
thanks
music.
thanks for having us, David.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
totally.
Yeah,
Thanks for
coming
the
out.
invite.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, so much. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for watching. This has been awesome. Reach out to these folks if you want to learn more about what they're doing, what's going on. And, don't forget, Colorado Modular Synth Society, we do one big event every 4th Sunday, but I'm also now doing a Friday weekly show on Friday from 4:30 to 5:30 Mountain Time, where we just call it the Modular Beat, where I just sit around and talk about modular stuff. So come hang out with me. So the channel's got a lot going on right now, and hopefully we'll be doing some big shows. I have some big announcements coming up soon for our October and November shows. So definitely follow us on Facebook, and we have albums on Bandcamp. We have an Instagram. We have a Discord, and definitely this YouTube. So, but check out everything. Download my albums if you want to, hear what Quinca is missing. I'm just joking.
Post the link.
Post that link. Drop that link. We'll put the links there. But thanks everybody for tuning in and watching. It's been awesome.
David, I just want to say, because I know a lot of people that are involved in all the synth societies like yours, SoCal, that next weekend is the Earth Modular Society 1-year anniversary, and I know that a lot of people from all the various synth societies are playing that event. So I just wanted to kind of put it out there, let everybody know all next Saturday, right? Like
Yeah.
Like an 18-hour
on their channel, 24 hours on Earth
Yeah.
Modular Synths YouTube.
Yeah, check out EMS's. They have a YouTube channel as well. So yeah, Earth Modular Society, their 1 year anniversary. Tons of people playing that. A lot of people in the community.
Yeah, I know some of your Colorado crew are playing.
Yeah, I think
as
so.
well. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think.
yeah, we're
few
playing.
people are.
Some people here.
There's a lot going on in the society. There's a lot of modules on the spots going on right now. Patrick O'Brien was on our show a week ago talking about modular on the mall. So if you're in DC, there's stuff going on down there. New York's doing stuff. I saw modular on the spot in Boston happening. And then California, you all have some stuff going on the spots. Some spots, lots of spots happening. So definitely, if you're watching this, and you're like, I don't think I have a community. I don't know anybody. Reach out to us, and we'll try to get you in touch with somebody in your community because so often I get reached out to by people in different areas, and then they find out that they do have somebody in the area. Like our friends in Carbondale, we have 2 friends in Carbondale. Didn't even know they were in the same town. So reach out to us. You never know. And at some point, we'll be traveling, or at least I'll be traveling, and we'll be able to do some shows on the road and go visit people and maybe visit some of those other spots. Anyhow, those are all big dreams and other things. So back to where I'm talking about. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. It's been awesome. Thanks, Starling, for coming on. I appreciate it. Jamie,
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
People go check out your music. Kinkas, we'll talk soon. We'll hang out sometime soon on the video chats for sure. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out too. All right, take care, everyone. Peace out.
Thanks.
Thanks.